Have you ever felt like your love life is less of a romance and more of a white-knuckle roller coaster ride of intense connection followed by absolute gripping panic? Well, you are definitely in the right place. Today, we're diving straight into this explainer to unpack the dynamics and patterns of anxious attachment. We're going to look at the behavioral research to understand not just what happens when anxiety grabs the steering wheel, but exactly why it happens. And I can promise you, by the time we wrap up, you're going to look at these behaviors through a totally different, much more compassionate lens. Let's get right to it. So, does silence mean the relationship is over? I want you to think about that visceral panic, that sheer dread that bubbles up when a partner just goes quiet, or when they leave a text on read for a few hours. For someone with an anxious attachment style, that silence, it isn't just a pause in the conversation. It feels like an impending catastrophe. Your brain literally sounds the alarm. You get that heavy sinking feeling in your chest, and your mind immediately jumps to the absolute worst-case scenario. They're losing interest, they're pulling away, the whole thing is over. It is an incredibly painful and exhausting place to be. But how does all that internal panic actually translate into outward action?
Let's look at pattern number 1, communication and conflict patterns.
Now, what's really interesting here is the exhausting, rapid-fire reality of over-communicating. We're talking lengthy texts explaining every single feeling, frequent check-ins, and this absolute burning need for immediate responses. Because in the mind of someone experiencing this, connection equals safety, right? So if there's even a perceived ounce of distance, the immediate reaction is to bridge that gap with words. We're talking paragraphs of text. But it doesn't stop when things are peaceful. It actually amplifies during a fight. During a disagreement, there's a strong tendency to actively pursue the partner. Say they need space and walk into another room, the anxiously attached person might actually physically follow them. There is a profound difficulty in just letting issues rest, all because of the sheer terror that a silent argument equals a permanent breakup. The conflict isn't just a disagreement, it feels like an existential threat.
Moving on to pattern number 2, intimacy and decision-making. Here, we see an intense desire for constant emotional and physical closeness, paired with a paralyzing fear of making independent decisions. And honestly, that desire for constant connection makes complete sense if distance feels like danger. But here's the catch. A partner's independence, like going out with friends or pursuing a solo hobby, can accidentally trigger an alarm bell that screams, "They don't need me, they're pulling away." And this bleeds directly into daily decision-making. It becomes incredibly difficult to make choices without your partner's input, entirely driven by this profound fear of disappointing them. You essentially start crowdsourcing your own life choices because you're terrified that making the wrong move might somehow push them away.
And that brings us to pattern number 3, jealousy and self-sacrifice.
So the crucial point here is how a heightened sensitivity to potential threats leads directly to self-sacrifice. When you have an anxious attachment style, your radar is always on. You are hypervigilant. You're analyzing every tone of voice, every micro-expression, every single interaction your partner has with someone else. It is downright exhausting. But here's the tragic irony. To mitigate those perceived threats, you often pivot to over-accommodating your partner's needs. You basically become whatever you think they want you to be. And in doing so, you completely neglect your own boundaries just to keep them happy. You silence your own needs because you genuinely believe that being easygoing or perfect is the only way to ensure they won't leave you.
Which leads us to a massive paradigm shift: adaptive strategies, not flaws.
Let's just take a breath here. Because looking at a list of all those behaviors, it's so easy to feel criticized or needy or just plain broken. But this brilliantly illustrates the core shift we need to make. These patterns aren't character flaws. They're adaptive strategies that once helped you navigate an unpredictable emotional environment. We absolutely must view these behaviors not as character failings, not as you being crazy or too much, but as historical survival tactics. Somewhere in your past, maybe in childhood with inconsistent caregivers, or perhaps in a previous highly volatile relationship, your environment was emotionally unpredictable. So you learned, quite intelligently, that to get your needs met and to stay safe, you had to be hypervigilant. You had to pursue connection aggressively. You had to abandon your own boundaries to appease someone else. Your brain actually developed a brilliant strategy to survive a chaotic environment. The problem isn't that you're flawed. The problem is simply that you're using a wartime survival strategy in what is supposed to be peacetime.
But what happens when you bring these specific adaptive strategies into a new relationship? This is exactly where we see the friction and the significant relationship distress that occurs when this anxious strategy collides head-on with an avoidant partner. Think about it like this. The anxious person's survival strategy is to close the distance, right? To text frequently, to pursue during conflict. But a partner with an avoidant attachment style has the exact opposite survival strategy. In an unpredictable environment, their brain learned that safety means pulling away, shutting down, and taking space. So, when the anxious person pursues for safety, it trips the avoidant person's alarm bell, causing them to withdraw further for their own safety, which of course triggers the anxious person even more. It is a perfect storm of distress. Two people, both desperately trying to feel safe, using opposing strategies that just perfectly trigger one another's deepest wounds.
And this brings us to a crucial question I want to leave you with today. What unpredictable emotional environments built your relationship habits? Understanding that your anxious patterns, the double texting, the fear of silence, the people-pleasing, are just old survival strategies actually gives you the power to change them. They kept you safe once, sure, but you do not have to be held hostage by them today. By looking back at your own history, you can start to decode the friction in your current relationships. You can start noticing when your threat radar is malfunctioning, and you can finally begin replacing those exhausting survival tactics with genuine, secure connection. Thank you so much for walking through this explainer with me. Take some time to really reflect on that question, and I'll see you next time.